Alrighty, what's going on, you guys? Welcome to my third ever live stream here on the SFS channel. Today I've got another Q&A style video for you guys, and I'm going to be here sitting around. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be live today, but I'm just going to be answering all of your guys' questions that I get here. Some last minute things to wrap up week 13 preparation. So if you guys don't have many questions for me, I've got a couple things I want to talk about here regarding injuries and who's going to be in and out of the lineups this week. But first of all, I see we've already got a question up here. What are my thoughts on A.J. Brown for the rest of the season to kick things off here? So A.J. Brown for me is simply a wide receiver one going forward this season. I don't necessarily think it matters what his schedule looks like because he's been so productive on minimal receptions. So for a guy who doesn't need that high volume to get the job done, A.J. Brown is a fantastic option in lineups. Weeks 14 through 16, he's got Jacksonville, Detroit, and Green Bay, so a great schedule to end the year too, and I think that entire Tennessee offense is going to be clicking, so certainly a guy that I would look to go get or start in your lineups. Devontae Booker, Miles Sanders for your RB2 this week. I think both of these are pretty darn good situations. I like the talent of Miles Sanders a little bit better for this week in particular. Miles Sanders against the Packers. Green Bay is one of the worst run defenses in the league, so I don't really think you can go wrong with Miles Sanders there. And then Devontae Booker has another great game against the Jets. As a backup, I think we have to trust more in the more elite talent, which would be Miles Sanders. I mean, we've seen Devontae Booker bounce around in the league here throughout his career, but he's certainly a solid option at RB2 or flex, but I just think you're in a really good situation with Sanders there, so I'd go that way. What's up, Ryan? How you doing today? Who should I start, Taysom Hill or Josh Allen? Josh Allen, let me see here. Who do the Bills play this week? I keep forgetting. Buffalo this week has the 49ers. San Fran can be a pretty nasty defense to go against. I think Taysom Hill against the Falcons has some opportunities there. I think if he actually starts getting the ball to Alvin Kamara out of the backfield too, that can really help his value out. So I think I might go Taysom Hill on this one by a slim margin, just because Josh Allen can get into kind of a funk and he might have some turnovers against San Fran this week. Start or sit questions. Devontae Booker or Dobbins, and then Fant or Goddard. That's another tough one. I think just because J.K. Dobbins is coming off of a little bit of an absence with his COVID case, and since he missed last week, I think maybe it's reasonable to go in with some caution this week with J.K. Dobbins. He's certainly a guy I like to start this week against a very good matchup at Dallas. But I think Devontae Booker against the Jets, if Las Vegas gets up early, I think that's a game that could be a blowout, and we could see a lot of carries for Devontae Booker. So that's a fancy situation I really like. I'd probably go Booker by a slight margin there. And then Fant or Goddard this week. Denver has Kansas City, I believe. That might be a high passing game. I could see Denver just getting completely squashed and completely blown out of the water, so they're trying to catch up. So Fant might get a lot of volume this week. I think I like that route. Goddard's not a bad option either, though, considering Carson Wentz is really only having success this year throwing to tight ends. Landry or David Johnson this week for your PPR league. David Johnson, I would normally in this matchup be all over, but since David Johnson's coming off the IR in a pretty severe concussion, I think I would land with Landry just by a slight bit here. Jarvis Landry, he's been super inconsistent, but the matchup is there. The opportunity is there for him to take advantage of that Tennessee secondary and have a really good game, and I think that he could have a nice amount of catches as well. So there's some pressure on Baker Mayfield in that game, but I think Jarvis Landry should be able to help him out, and so I'd go that way. But any other week, if Johnson wasn't coming off an injury, I'd go with him. Lockett or Kupp, Gore, James White, and Damian Harris pick two, and Tonyan or Fant this week. I'd go with Tonyan. Like I said, Fant has a really nice opportunity. They're probably going to be trailing for a lot of that game, but Robert Tonyan's been finding the end zone a lot this year. He's got 7 touchdowns. Kupp or Lockett, that's another tough one. I really like Kupp's matchup, and I think that Lockett against the Giants could do fairly well too. So I think if you're in a PPR league, maybe go with Kupp because I think he'll see slightly more volume in that game. Tyler Lockett's been kind of streaky and all over the place this year, so maybe less reliable, but maybe has a slightly higher ceiling just because he's got Russell Wilson. But we could also see Seattle blow out New York because they're likely to be without Daniel Jones. So I think Kupp is the better fantasy situation this week. And then for your running backs, I think I would go probably with Damian Harris. I mean, we haven't seen Michelle just came back from injury, but he didn't get any carries last week, so I think I'd go with Damian Harris there. Is Trubisky starting this week? Yes. Nick Foles is actually healthy and prepared to play, so he'll be suited up, but I don't think he is the starter right now. I actually just saw a report not too long ago that Mitch Trubisky is the starter right now. Let me just double check that. I'm pretty sure that, yep, Nick Foles is back to full health and at practice, but Mitch Trubisky will still be the starter. So, yes, Mitch Trubisky will be the Bears quarterback this week. Taysom Hill or Kyler Murray this week. I think I would lean towards Taysom Hill. Kyler's got a really tough matchup against the Rams, and I think that Jalen Ramsey has the potential to have an enormous impact on DeAndre Hopkins' ability to get open and find space. So, and then Kyler's got that AC joint sprain. He was a full participant in practice this week and is healthy and supposedly ready to go, but that still could be a bit of an issue and a lingering thing for him. So I'd go Taysom Hill. Hayden Hurst or the Packers tight end. I think that I would go with Robert Tonyan this week if that's the Packers tight end you're referring to. They've got a lot of guys there, but he's the typical receiving threat. Hayden Hurst early on in the season, I would have definitely went with him. The Saints were really awful at covering tight ends early on this year, but that defense has really kicked it into gear the last few weeks here, so I think that that's definitely something I would stay away from. That Saints defense is going off right now, so I would stay out of their way. Start 2, A.J. Brown, Michael Thomas, or Keenan Allen PPR. I think I'd go A.J. Brown and Michael Thomas this week. I talked a little bit about Keenan Allen in my must-sits video, or at least in my guys to fade this week. And I really love Keenan Allen the rest of the season. He's a great player, and with Justin Herbert at quarterback, it's a lot of good fantasy opportunities there. But this week against Bill Belichick, I have a little bit of concern about Justin Herbert's production, just because we've seen rookie quarterbacks and younger players struggle so mightily against that group. Belichick's probably going to try and take away Allen. He's probably going to send Stephon Gilmore his way and shadow him for the majority of the game. So I would definitely look to stay away from Keenan Allen this week because I think that he is the primary focus of Belichick. Goddard or Henry, that's another good one. I think that I honestly would feel comfortable starting Hunter Henry this week. Like I just said, I think that the Patriots are going to make it really tough for Justin Herbert to get the ball to Keenan Allen. So I think that'll open up opportunities for other players on that team, and Herbert will be forced to throw the ball to those other guys. So Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, Hunter Henry, I think are in for some nice games, and he could even find the end zone. So I like going that way this week. Do I know? Yep. Trubisky is starting this week. He will be the Bears starter over Nick Foles, even though Foles is healthy right now. Antonio Gibson or Michael Thomas, I would definitely go Michael Thomas in PPR. I think maybe you could make the argument that in standard, Gibson deserves some more respect there, but really tough matchup against Pittsburgh this week. Not a big fan of that game. And then Michael Thomas has Atlanta, and he had 9 catches for 104 yards in the last time they played, so I think Michael Thomas is the way to go. J.K. Dobbins or Myles Gaskin. Both of these guys have good matchups. Both didn't play last week. Obviously, Gaskin's been on the IR. I think normally I'm very concerned about running backs coming back in their first week off injury, especially when they are coming off the injured reserve. Gaskin had a slightly significant injury there that put him on the shelf for a couple weeks, but Salvon Ahmed is doubtful right now. There's not really too many other guys besides Matt Breida that can steal touches for him, so I think Gaskin against Cincinnati is definitely solid, but I really like Dobbins against the Cowboys as well. So you could really go either way here. I might lean slightly towards Dobbins because his was more of an illness. He had COVID, so did Mark Ingram, but Gaskin was more of an actual physical injury. So I think I'd lead Dobbins by a slight margin, but both could work out this week. Woods or David Johnson, I'm definitely going with Robert Woods this week, Jerry. I think that the matchup against Arizona is too good to pass on. His rushing value he gets in that offense on end arounds and jet sweeps are too good to pass up. I really like his floor every week, and I think against the Cardinals this week he's got another great opportunity to put up some nice numbers. Pick 2, non-PPR. Oh, hang on. I just lost your comment here a second. I started reading it. Pick 2, non-PPR. Here we go. Gallman, Gaskin, or Dobbins. Gallman, I would definitely lock in this week. I think that he's going to have a pretty nice game against Seattle, as long as they don't get blown out. And he's been a guy on the goal line who's been pretty fantastic this year. So I would definitely go that route. And then I just talked about a couple seconds ago how I thought J.K. Dobbins was a slightly safer start this week over Gaskin just because he's coming off the IR. But I think both of those guys are nice RB2s the rest of the way. Dobbins, Gaskin, or Jonathan Taylor. I think you got to go Jonathan Taylor this week. I really like his game against the Texans, especially in standard leagues. And I think that he can put up some nice numbers in a very safe floor. I don't necessarily think he's a flashy start, a guy that's going to get a ton of points. But I think he's definitely a safe low floor or high floor guy, Which 2 quarterbacks should I start? Must be a super flex league. That's pretty cool to see. I think I'd go for you. I think I like Cousins and Taysom Hill this week. Fitzpatrick could have a nice game, but it's actually going to be a game time decision whether or not Tua plays. So that could flip either way there. So I think Cousins against Jacksonville, that's a pretty weak secondary and something I think you could take advantage of. And then Taysom Hill against Atlanta, another great matchup. I don't think Taysom Hill will have as much success running the ball as he did a couple weeks ago, but I definitely think there will be more opportunities for him to throw the ball. So that's the way I'd go in that one. Trubisky, Carr, Tua, or Cam, pick one. This is another tough one this week. Immediate impression. So Tua is a game time decision. I would stay away from him this week. I think that's just kind of a disaster waiting to happen if you go out and start him when we're not even sure if he can play because he's healthy enough. But right off the bat, my initial impression here is Derek Carr against the winless Jets. I mean, that defense is awful. Their offense is always punting and keeping those guys out there. So I think he's got the opportunity this week. Aguilar and Henry Ruggs, decent flex option streams. I think those guys can go off, have a couple deep catches and a touchdown. So we'll see about those guys, but I think that's a nice matchup there. Let me check who Cam plays really quick, though. The Chargers. That could be a decent route as well, but I think Derek Carr is slightly safer. Start Dobbins or Devontae Booker. I would go with Booker this week in that situation against the Jets. I think, like I said, Raiders get up early. They control the pace of that game, and they run the football a lot without Jacobs on the field still. They're going to be running the ball over and over again. So Booker is really safe this week. Fant, Firkser, or Burton. This is really interesting. I really like Anthony Firkser this week. The Browns are the worst defense against the tight end this season in fantasy, and Jonnu Smith is ruled out for the week. So I think that's a very interesting situation. Fant, like I said earlier, Kansas City, I think will get up early in that game and force Denver to throw the ball. But I think him or Firkser are really solid options. Maybe I would lean slightly towards Fant because the pace of that game is probably going to be passing and playing from behind. So a little bit more of a situation where they might have to throw the ball, whereas Firkser has a good matchup, but they might control that game against the Browns. Who were your worst and best fantasy player predictions this season? So I'm guessing this is from draft season. Who did I hit on the best and who did I whiff on? I'd say off the top of my head, some guys I was very adamant about fading were Kenyon Drake. He was going in the first round in some leagues, and that turned out to be fairly true. For the longest time this year, he was an RB3. Kenny Galladay, I said to fade, and he's been injured all year. Hasn't been putting up too many points. I'm trying to think of some guys that I was low on that I didn't expect to be so good this year. I would say DK Metcalf, I didn't necessarily fade, but I did not expect this type of a season from him. That's something I would have to dive into and analyze. I'll probably make a video about that once the season's over, but definitely something interesting to look at. Just traded Julio Jones for Chris Godwin and Cooper Kupp. Thoughts? I really like that trade. I think that's a very solid move for your team. Julio Jones dealing with a hamstring injury right now. That's one of the worst ones you can deal with as a wide receiver because you just can't separate and run as hard and cut like you would if you were healthy. So Chris Godwin, great playoff schedule. Tampa Bay has a really easy schedule against the pass. And then Cooper Kupp, a really nice PPR play. And they got off the safe floor, so that's a very solid trade for you. Deontay Johnson or T. Higgins. I definitely go Deontay Johnson this week. And it has nothing to do with matchup because I think he has a very tough matchup against the Washington football team this week. But T. Higgins without Joe Burrow, I just don't trust the Bengals offense. Ryan Finley, I just don't trust that quarterback play right now in Cincinnati. And I think that him, Tyler Boyd, and basically every Bengals offensive player in fantasy took a huge hit the second Joe Burrow went down. So I'm staying away from those guys the rest of the year. What's up, Keenan? Tannehill or Taysom Hill this week. And then Deontay Johnson or JK at flex. I think that one depends on what your league scoring is. If it's PPR, we're seeing Deontay Johnson lead his team in targets right now. So he's a pretty reliable option in that sense that he's going to get his looks. So as long as he catches the football, he's going to have somewhat of a floor. But for Taysom Hill or Ryan Tannehill, I really like Tannehill against the Browns this week. I think he's going to have some opportunities to throw the ball. And I think that there are going to be a lot of big plays for that offense, and it might be a high-scoring game. But then on the other side, I really like Taysom Hill as well because that rushing value and that weaker Falcons defense. So I don't think you can really go wrong with either of those guys. I'd probably lead Taysom Hill by a slight margin, but I think both of those guys, like I said, are great options. And then if it's a standard league, maybe lean towards JK, but in PPR, I'd go Deontay Johnson. What is my thoughts on Josh Allen against the Steelers defense in Week 14? That's a great question. I think that Josh Allen will be able to be productive against that defense, but I do think that you have to expect 1 to 2 turnovers in that game, whether it's an interception, a forced fumble. He's going to cough the ball up somehow in that game. But the good news is for quarterbacks, while they do turn the football over, the weakness of the Steelers defense is the secondary. So I definitely think there is room for teams to go out and throw the football down the field and have big plays. So Josh Allen is definitely a guy who I think still deserves the start, but might see some turnovers in that game. What do I think about Lockett and D-Hop will do this week after horrible weeks last week? I think DeAndre Hopkins is going to struggle again. Back-to-back weeks, 2 of the top corners in the league, shadowing him around the field. Stephon Gilmore, Jalen Ramsey. I mean, it's not really his fault either, and his quarterback's banged up. So I think Hopkins will struggle this week, but then start to get back to himself in the fantasy playoffs level 1 next week. So, and then Lockett, I think Lockett has another situation this game where he's probably boom-bust against the Giants. Seattle is playing the Giants without Daniel Jones, so there's a very real possibility that the Giants just get walled in this game and blown out from the start, and then they don't have to pass the football, and therefore Tyler Lockett doesn't get any looks. So I would be highly worried about both of those guys this week. What's up, Lucas? What's up, Ostino? Dobbins or Booker this week? I'd go Booker. Devontae Booker is going to get a ton of carries, so that's the way I'd go. I think the Raiders control the entire pace of that game, and they end up just being able to run up the clock against the Jets. CEH or Devontae Booker, half PPR, and then Gesicki or Rudolph this week. So in terms of CEH or Booker, I think I would still go with Devontae Booker. Like I said, he's going to get a lot of volume this week. If he falls in the end zone, he can have a really nice week. And we actually saw him in a game where Josh Jacobs played have one of the better, more impressive games that backups had all year in terms of handcuff play. He had 16 for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Denver Broncos and 20.5 fantasy points. That was a great day for him. And then if we go back and look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire against the Broncos earlier this season, I believe he got in the end zone but wasn't highly effective in terms of his touches on the ground. CEH had 8 for 46 and a touchdown and 1 reception for 17 yards. So we've been kind of seeing this trend for a while now. I don't expect Clyde Edwards-Helaire to be a high-touch guy, but he's definitely an efficient guy and a highly talented player. So it's really up to you, but I would go Booker here. I think he's got the safer floor just because if we don't see CEH get a ton of catches or get in the end zone, he can put up some really rough weeks just because this season he isn't getting those touches we hoped for. And then the other part of your question, Gesicki or Rudolph, I think I would go with Gesicki if Ryan Fitzpatrick is the starter because he seems to like to throw jump balls to him, and down in the red zone, he's one of his favorite targets. So I like that option. Otherwise, Rudolph is a decent stream as well because Kirk Cousins really trusts him. So is Zeke safe to start after Week 13? I definitely don't want anything to do with Zeke in Week 13. But afterwards, Elliott and the Cowboys, I believe, still have a pretty tough schedule. Cincinnati in Week 14, you can definitely trust him there. I 100% think there's room for a Zeke start that week. But then San Fran in Week 15 and Philadelphia in Week 16, I'm not overly excited about those matchups. I think you can probably start him and expect maybe high-level RB2 numbers. But I definitely don't think that he's going to be that top-end producer that you guys were hoping for when you drafted him, just because of how things have played out for the Cowboys this year. What's up? Wide receiver 1 is Diggs. Wide receiver 2 is Julio Jones, and was thinking Cooks or Parker at flex, or should I leave Julio out of the equation this week and go Cooks and Parker? Well, right now, Julio Jones, like I said, questionable with that hamstring, but I still think he can be pretty darn good against that Saints defense. He's Julio Jones. He's pretty much matchup proof when he's healthy, but hamstrings can be very uncomfortable. They can cause your play to go down significantly. But I think at the end of the day, you leave him in your lineups if he goes and plays, because he's a gamer. He's a really tough player, and if he's out there on the field, he is going to try and produce like he normally would. So if he's on the field, great, but you need to make sure he ends up suiting up for that game. And then for your other spot, I think I would go with Cooks being elevated into that number 1 role in the Texans offense. I think we can't expect him to immediately pick up where Will Fuller left off, but I think we can expect an increase in volume for him and a nice production output. So, hey man, I traded Mixon, Eckler, and A-Rob for Sanders and Aaron Jones and Godwin. Do I think you won that trade? I think you did. Mixon right now, we're not sure if he's going to return for the rest of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't come back. Austin Eckler right now looking like a great fantasy piece. He's getting high-level receptions, had 11 last week. And then A-Rob is a very solid wide receiver. But Miles Sanders and Aaron Jones, I love their schedules the rest of the season and think they can put up high-end running back numbers. This week, I think Sanders is in for a huge day against the Packers, and I really love their playoff schedules. And then Godwin, excellent playoff schedule for him in Tampa Bay. So I think those are some really good lineup pieces for you going forward the rest of the season. Zach Moss or Cam Akers at your running back 2 this week. Cam Akers is actually coming off one of his better games of the season last week. I believe he had 9 carries for 84 yards and a touchdown. But yeah, I think I'd still go Akers over Moss if those are the guys you're looking at this week. Not the best options, but I definitely think that Cam Akers has the ability to continue to be the hot hand in that committee and get a lot of touches. Keenan Allen or Michael Thomas this week. Colby, I think I'd go with Michael Thomas. Keenan Allen, I just am a little bit worried about Belichick and how he's going to scheme up that game against Herbert, and I think he's actually going to try and take away Allen from Herbert this week. So Michael Thomas against the weaker Falcons secondary is the better option. Robert Woods, Debo, or Dobbins this week. I'd go Robert Woods. I love that matchup against the Cardinals this week. I think Debo has a solid matchup as well, and so does Dobbins, but I think Robert Woods has the best floor of the 3 guys and the potential to have a really nice game. We've seen him go pretty hot this year and have some pretty nice games. Which quarterback should I start for the playoffs? Derek Carr or Teddy Bridgewater? Let's take a look at their closing schedules here. By the way, guys, I will have my positional rankings for the fantasy football playoffs for each position coming out next week. Early next week, I'll have all those out for you guys. And I'll be looking at all of those positions and players and letting you guys know my thoughts on them. So Derek Carr and the Raiders have the Jets, the Colts, the Chargers, and Miami coming up here. Notably, I'm a little bit worried about that Colts game. I think that one can get a little bit ugly for the Raiders. And I think Miami is a very impressive defensive team as well. Right in the playoff hunt for the rest of the season. And Derek Carr might have a pick or 2 in that game. Just because of how good they've been against the pass and such. So that's my thoughts on him. And then Teddy Bridgewater, he's got Denver after the bye this week, Green Bay, and Washington. I definitely think he can light it up against Denver. Green Bay is another team I think he has a nice ceiling against and a pretty safe floor, but then Washington is a little bit ugly. I think that I would probably go and bet on Teddy Bridgewater and that offense with CMC coming back, hopefully. He's going to have another option to pass to, and obviously he can just take over games. So I think I might go Teddy by a hair there. Start Rudolph, Jordan Reed, or Burton this week. Let's see, the Colts. The Colts have the Houston Texans, right? I think Trey Burton could be a nice stream this week. The Colts are playing decently offensively, but are not the most explosive team in the world, and the Texans just have a bad defense. So I think you can go Trey Burton there. Josh Allen or Russell Wilson. In terms of this week, I think that the Bills against I keep forgetting. The 49ers. I think I go Josh Allen just because no matter how that game goes, no matter the turnovers he has, I still think Josh Allen is going to have the entire game to put up fantasy relevant numbers. Like I said, if Daniel Jones doesn't play against the Giants, I think Russell Wilson and the Seahawks can just blow them out. So that might be a little bit of a risky play there. Obviously, he's Russell Wilson, so he's going to be a starting level quarterback this week. I just don't know if he gets 4 quarters worth of meaningful snaps in that game. Tampa Bay defense or Browns defense for playoffs. Definitely Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has they both have good pass rushes, but Cleveland's so weak on the back end. They're getting fried lately. I don't trust that defense at all. They've got Myles Garrett going for them, but that's about it. I feel like Tampa Bay is getting overlooked for playoff defense. I picked them up. Yeah, I think that's smart. Tampa Bay, like I said, with Shaq Barrett and those guys, they get after the ball up front, and then they've got ball hawks in the secondary that can go out and get picks for you. So I've been rolling with Tampa Bay's defense all year in a lot of leagues. How do I feel about Keenan Allen this week? Keenan Allen, I'm a little bit worried about. I think he's going to get Gilmore for the most of that game against the Patriots, and I think that Bill Belichick is going to do everything he can to make sure Herbert has to go to other options on the field and not rely on his safety blanket, which is Keenan Allen. So I would look to see if you've got better options on your bench. What's up, Time Turner? Who do I like more in Dynasty for the next couple years? Delvin, Kamara, Henry, Watson, or Wilson? QB Flex, Premium, Super Flex. Okay. So I'm assuming that the quarterbacks are kept separate from this list, and then you want your running backs as well. So if you guys didn't know, I'll be doing a lot of off-season stuff regarding Dynasty. I think it's a great way to play fantasy football, and if you guys haven't tried it out, I highly encourage you guys to. But I think in terms of the running back that I am the highest on for the next couple of years here, I think that Dalvin Cook is in a fantastic situation in Minnesota, and that is a team 100% geared and built around him. I would move Kamara down this list a little bit for right now, just because we don't know how much longer he'll be playing with Drew Brees, and we know right now what we're seeing with Drew Brees off the field is Kamara's value has tanked, and he's not getting any receptions, so that's a huge concern. And then Derrick Henry, obviously a great player. That entire offense is built around Derrick Henry, with the amount of touches we're seeing him get right now and the work we're seeing him get is going to rack up eventually and going to take a toll on his body, and I'm not really sure how many more seasons he has of these just brutally dominant games in physical seasons where he just runs through defenses here in December and January. So I think Dalvin Cook would be my top guy there. All of them have their risks. They're all top players right now in fantasy, but moving forward, I think they might have some risks there, like I said. And then I would honestly go probably Russell Wilson over Watson right now, just because Deshaun Watson doesn't have that dominant alpha wide receiver to work with. Wilson is tied to DK Metcalf. He's tied to Tyler Lockett, and he's got some other running backs in that system that he can use. I think Seattle needs to go out and draft some linemen and probably get another running back here soon, but the wide receivers he's got to work with are far better, and I think that Deshaun Watson needs some help if he's going to move ahead of him, but I think that Watson could definitely get there. We just have to see how the season plays out here as we move into free agency. Start to Devontae Booker or Kareem Hunt this week. I like both matchups, but I'm going to go with Devontae Booker just simply because he's got the Jets. I've been talking about this a little bit here on the stream. I think that Las Vegas can completely control the pace of that game. They can take things over and really just own the Jets, run the ball down their throat all game long. And I think that Hunt is a solid option in PPR formats, but as a guy who's not the official starter on that team, has a little bit more risk. Dallas Goedert or Robert Tonyan this week. I'd go with Robert Tonyan. Tonyan's tight end 3 right now in half PPR. 7 touchdowns on the year. He's been incredibly productive. Taysom Hill or Trubisky. This is Taysom Hill very easily. I know the Lions have their issues defensively, but they're a little bit more solid against the pass than they are on the ground. So I think that's a David Montgomery game all day long. And Taysom Hill is going to go all over the Falcons defense. Robert Woods, Allen Robinson, Deontay Johnson. Pick 3. Pick 2. I was going to say Albert. There's 3 guys there. All right, I would go with Robinson and Woods this week. Allen Robinson must start territory the rest of the season. He's one of the better wide receivers in fantasy football, one of the most consistent guys. And in PPR, he hasn't even laid really one dud week because I think his lowest total is like 9 or 10 points this year. So Allen Robinson 100% in all lineups every game the rest of the season, as long as that knee injury doesn't hold him out of any games. And then Robert Woods this week, great matchup against the Cardinals. I love his floor every week. He's got great rushing value in that offense too, on wide receiver screen passes, jet sweeps, and arounds. He does a lot of things for the Rams, so I love him in fantasy football the rest of the year. Projection for Dobbins and Booker. I'm going to say I'm not going to put a point total out there just because I don't know what format you're talking about, Dan. But for Devontae Booker, I'm expecting around 20 to 23 touches, anywhere between 85 and 100 scrimmage yards against the Jets. I really think they're going to control the pace of that game and really be able to just run the football all day long. And we've seen Devontae Booker have some really nice games as well this season, even as a backup. So I think Booker gets a high touch count. The Raiders want to run the football. That's what they're good at. And then I think Dobbins, he can even get in the end zone too, by the way. J.K. Dobbins, I would expect 12 to 15 touches, anywhere between 65 and 80 scrimmage yards, and maybe a touchdown as well. So I'm a little bit more conservative about Dobbins. I think he can definitely score this week, but he's going to need a little bit more help, I think, than Booker will in terms of the carry count. Trace McSorley or Ben DiNucci. You gotta go with Trace McSorley, man. By the way, Trace McSorley is actually expected to start this week. Lamar Jackson is eligible to be activated in that game, but he has not been ruled whether or not he can play or not. So right now the Ravens are preparing to start Trace McSorley. We'll see if that ends up actually happening, but we saw him throw a 75-yard touchdown pass last week, so I guess anything's possible. D-Hop or MT, I'm going to go MT this week against the Falcons, 9 for 104 in their last matchup this season. D-Hop's got Jalen Ramsey all day long, so that's going to be a tough matchup. Wayne Gallman or Booker, half PPR this week. I'll take Booker. I think Wayne Gallman is definitely going to get his work if the Giants are in that football game, but I've been saying a couple times in this stream, I think that the Seattle Seahawks can just blow out New York without Daniel Jones on the field, so I would be conservative about playing your Giants this week, even in a good matchup. I'm Devontae Booker all day long on that one. Pick 2, full PPR, Debo, Boyd, Chark, Pittman. If Chark plays this week, I think he's supposed to and is actually off the injury list right now. I'll go Chark against Minnesota, and then I'll go Debo against the Bills. Boyd, no Joe Burrow. He's not as good anymore. He was a really consistent guy and a great lineup piece earlier in the year, but that's just an unfortunate injury for all involved. Diggs or Julio Jones this week, I'm definitely going to go with Diggs. Stephon Diggs is one of my top 5 wideouts the rest of this season. Julio Jones dealing with a hammy injury right now. That's a big deal for wide receivers, so I would definitely stay clear of Julio if you have other elite lineup pieces, but obviously he's one of the top wideouts in the game, so if he plays, he's still going to have some lineup value, obviously. For playoffs, Evan Ingram or Jonnu Smith. So once we see Daniel Jones get healthy and back on the field, I think we got to go with Evan Ingram. Both have been inconsistent tight ends this year, but Jonnu Smith is actually injured right now and is not going to play this week. So once Danny Dimes gets back on the field, Evan Ingram is one of the more elite tight ends in terms of his talent level and what he's able to do after the catch. Stafford, Wentz, Glennon, or Mullins. I think, honestly, I would stay away from Glennon and Mullins, but I think Stafford and Wentz are kind of interchangeable. I mean, Stafford's not going to have Kenny G this week, so he's going to be throwing to Marvin Jones primarily, and he's also, DeAndre Swift is doubtful, so he's not going to have him out of the backfield. I'd probably go Wentz. I know Wentz has been playing awful football right now, but as a Packer fan, our defense is bend but don't break. We give up a ton of yards. I think that Philly is going to be able to move the football down the field against us and really have a successful offensive game. I think the one thing that might hold them back is that our defense is opportunistic and forces some takeaways, but in terms of actual, I don't think we're going to shut them down as bad as we saw Seattle do last week. I think Wentz should have some success, and especially with Ertz coming back, that honestly could be huge for him. Goddard and Ertz will be on the field this week. I think that's the way you go. Oh, you're having your Dynasty draft right now. Wow, okay, so we've got one of the guys here in the comment section, Time Turner, has a Dynasty draft going on right now. And it looks like he's going to draft Delvin. He's got a lot of players gone off the board, but yeah, I think Dalvin Cook is a solid pick early on in Dynasty drafts. Like I said, I'll be getting into a ton more Dynasty stuff, a lot of rookie player rankings coming into the NFL this offseason. I'll be doing a ton of research all offseason long for you guys, trying to get you guys the best information and prepare you as best as possible for draft season next year. Obviously, the focus right now is still on this season. I'm going to try and finish you guys off and get as many of you guys a fantasy championship in 2020 as possible. But moving into next year, if you guys are satisfied and enjoying my stuff this year, I think next year is going to completely blow that out of the water just because of all the stuff I've got planned to improve the content here and the production. I think that there's going to be a lot of great stuff for you guys next season. So I'm really excited for that. I'm really looking forward to doing some Dynasty stuff this offseason and getting you guys prepped for 2021 and actually having a full fantasy season together with you guys. I think that'll be awesome. Gibson or Taylor this week, PPR, back into some questions. I'm going to go Jonathan Taylor. Rest of season, I've got Gibson far higher on my list. I haven't come out with that video. I'll be putting that stuff out next week early on. I'll be doing all my positions for rest of season playoff rankings. But Gibson, he's been great. He's been on a hot streak the last few weeks here. But Jonathan Taylor against Houston is just a better matchup. And Pittsburgh has been one of the more stingy matchups against the run this year. So I would look to stay away from them. Dobbins, Taylor, or excuse me, J.K. Dobbins, David Johnson, or Latavius Murray, full PPR. I'd go with J.K. Dobbins here just because David Johnson coming off the IR, a bit of a risky matchup, or not even a matchup necessarily. The Colts have been a very good unit defensively at times, but have been getting gashed lately. And then Latavius Murray, not officially a starter for that football team, but he's been getting a lot of touches with Breeze out of the lineup. I just think that J.K. Dobbins is still your safest bet there. But I could also see you putting in Latavius Murray. I would definitely try and stay away from David Johnson this week, though. Braxton Berrios or Marquise Goodwin, full PPR for a playoff spot. Ooh. Okay, so I'm going to guess, or at least hope, that this is a flex spot for your team because those are getting into some pretty long grasping stream picks. But, you know... Wait, hang on. Do you mean Marquise Brown? Hollywood Brown? I believe Marquise Goodwin was a 49er and Eagle a while back who opted out this season. I think I'd go Hollywood this week. Especially, we saw Trace McSorley actually try and throw him the ball last week. He had a long touchdown, so I think that might be a way to go. And then I'm not so sure Braxton Berrios is even highly involved in that Jets offense right now with Crowder back at the slot. CEH, Debo, Taylor, or Juju. I just need one. I think out of all these guys, I believe you're in PPR, right, James? I think you go probably CEH out of this group. I really like Taylor, but we might see Clyde catch a nice amount of passes, and hopefully he finds the end zone. Thing to monitor, though, CEH has been dealing with an illness all week and has not practiced, so that's definitely something to be conservative about and keep in mind and look out for tomorrow. I know Jay Glazer does great in and out segments before the games on Fox, so make sure to watch those. Stay out on the lookout for Twitter and whatnot to make sure he plays, but I think he should go. Gio Bernard or Benny Snell, half PPR. Jay, I think that you should end up going with... I'd feel much better about Benny Snell, even though this is half PPR. I just don't believe in that Bengals offense or any of their offensive skill players anymore with Joe Burrow out of the lineup. Benny Snell has a really tough matchup, but I think we know what we're going to get from him if James Conner doesn't play. He will be the bell cow for that offense. He'll get the touches, so if he gets in the end zone, he's a guy who can put up a solid week, but I wouldn't expect a high ceiling from either of those guys. DJ Chark or Terry McLaurin. McLaurin 100%. He's a must-start wide receiver right now. Top 10 guy right now for the rest of the season. Terry McLaurin's been excellent all year long. Kyler Murray or Justin Herbert this week. This is tough because I'm fading both of these guys for Week 13. If you really take a look at the matchup, I think I would go Herbert by a hair. Kyler Murray's got an AC joint sprain in his shoulder. He's got Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey up against him on the defensive side for the Rams, and I think that can be a pretty ugly matchup for the Cardinals if they don't play that game properly. I think they're going to try and take away Hopkins in that matchup, and I think they're going to have some struggles running the ball. LA might have one of the best secondaries in the league right now, so I think Kyler might struggle. And Herbert, I think they're going to try and take away Keenan Allen from him in New England, but ultimately I think that he can get the ball to Eckler and Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, and save his value there. And the game is actually being played at home for Los Angeles, so I think that's a huge thing too, that they don't have to go to New England. Gaskin or Booker this week, definitely go with Devontae Booker. I really like his game this week against the Jets. I would have loved Josh Jacobs this week, but unfortunately that ankle injury is going to keep him out there. Booker should have a very nice game. Projections. Oh, wait, here we go. Melvin Gordon, Kenyon Drake, Gio Bernard, Dobbins, pick 3. This week, I'll definitely have to go with Dobbins. Melvin Gordon. What has Melvin Gordon been up to lately? He's been pretty disappointing this season. He started off the year fairly hot, was getting in the end zone a lot. We saw him do pretty decent against the Dolphins, and then he struggled, which was to be expected last week against the Saints. I think I might try and stay away from Gio Bernard of that group. I think Drake and Gordon might have some tough games as well, but that Bengals offense is probably the least likely to have a big game of the bunch. Projections for Adam Thielen, Allen Robinson, DK, full PPR. I think DK might be in for a pretty darn big game against the Giants. Allen Robinson is always a must-start player for me at this point. We've seen him be so consistent and the only dependable guy in Chicago. So I'd definitely go that route in all leagues. If you guys have Allen Robinson, I think he's probably in for 7 to 9 catches. I mean, the guy gets the ball so much in every game. And we could probably see him go from anywhere to 60 to 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, it just depends on how much they end up throwing the ball. But he was great against Green Bay last week, and Jair Alexander, one of the best corners. And then Thielen, I like him a lot this week as well against the Jags. I think him and Kirk Cousins have a pretty good connection, and he should see a fair amount of targets. Do I agree with Parker over Debo if Fitzpatrick plays? But if Tua plays, then stay with Debo. I definitely think Devontae Parker's value increases when Ryan Fitzpatrick is the quarterback, but I still don't know if I would pick him over Debo Samuel. I know the matchup isn't ideal for Debo, but we see him be used so versatilely in that offense in San Fran. Kyle Shanahan just loves him, and he gets the ball in a variety of ways. So even though Parker sees a little bit of an increase in his production when Fitzpatrick's the quarterback, I think I'd ultimately still stay with Debo this week. I've got Delvin, Gaskin, and Booker playing tomorrow. How do you think they'll do? Let's see. Dalvin Cook this week. Minnesota's got the Jags. He's going to have another big game. I mean, Dalvin Cook's been elite this year. Probably one of the better running backs, obviously, in fantasy. And his projections are ridiculous right now because of how well he's doing in those games. Booker, I think, will do pretty dang good tomorrow against the Jets. And I think Gaskin, you can be cautiously optimistic with because there's not really too many guys to even consider taking away touches from him. But ultimately, I still think he is a very he's got his risks attached to him. I don't think he's a super risky guy, but he's definitely coming off the IR, so that's something to monitor. But I think with Booker and Delvin, you're definitely set there and can afford to roll the dice with Gaskin here. Hi, Paige. How's it going? Gaskin, Parker, Hines, or Taylor at flex in PPR leagues. I'm assuming, yeah, you can only have one of these guys. So I'm going to say that you should probably go with either Hines or Taylor. And since it's PPR, I would probably lean towards Nyheim Hines out of the backfield. He's been so good this year. Short, little shifty guy. Finishes runs hard. He's tough to tackle. So in PPR leagues, I really like flexing Hines this week. What's up, Huddy? How you doing, man? Thoughts on Tyler Boyd the rest of this season? I loved Tyler Boyd when Joe Burrow was in the lineup. He was one of my favorite guys and absolute pencil in at wide receiver 2. I almost thought of him in the same breath as Allen Robinson, whereas he was that guy you knew was going to give you a safe wide receiver 1 floor and just be an all-out start every week in your lineups. Tyler Boyd was that guy, but for wide receiver 2s for me. But with Joe Burrow out, I just don't know how much you can trust him. His matchup against the Dolphins this week, very unfavorable. I don't like that matchup at all. Miami is forced to turn over, and I don't know how many straight games, but it's a very impressive streak. Brian Flores, has a very good thing going on there. in Miami. So I would not like any Bengals offensive player this week. Cooks or Julio this week at running back 2, and should I go with a 3 RB system this week with J-Rob, Sanders, and Gaskin? This week, if Julio suits up, I think you go with Julio Jones just because he is Julio Jones, and he's pretty dang tough. So if he goes out there and plays the game, he is going to put up very dependable numbers. Obviously, his ceiling takes a hit with a hamstring injury. But Brandon Cooks, I think this week the matchup is tough against Indianapolis, but after this week, he's going to kind of get elevated into that number 1 wide receiver role. Well, he's going to be in that role this week, but I think that the matchup is just tougher. And for a guy who's kind of a burner and wants to go down the field against the Tampa 2 defense, that's not exactly the most favorable thing, but I still think he'll be productive. And then I think you could go with that 3 running back system in your team this week. If Cooks or Julio is for your flex, I would definitely go with one of them over Gaskin. But J-Rob, Sanders are extremely dependable guys this week. I really like them, and I think that Gaskin definitely deserves some consideration this week, but his ceiling is a little bit lower than normal. D-Hop or Ridley this week, and Gaskin or Ridley at flex if you choose D-Hop full PPR. I'm going to go with Ridley over both of those guys. I think Calvin Ridley, with the Julio injury, is going to see a little bit of an uptick in his targets. I think we're going to see him get the ball a little bit more. And obviously with Lattimore probably covering Julio Jones for that Saints game, I think that we're going to see Ridley have the more advantageous matchup of the group and probably be the better option there. How do I feel about Swift for weeks 14 through 16? Do I think he'll be healthy by then? So, to my understanding right now, DeAndre Swift obviously had that concussion, but then we saw DeAndre Swift have an illness, which I believe is what's holding him out in this game, and I don't think he's fully recovered from that concussion either. Let me look this up really quick. He's doubtful right now. He's out of practice with an illness, and he's not expected to play this week. So, yeah, he's probably not playing this week. But let me take a quick peek here at Detroit's closing schedule for the fantasy playoffs. I really like DeAndre Swift at the trade deadline, and obviously for a guy who was stepping into that starting role in Detroit, a fantastic option. Green Bay, Tennessee, and Tampa Bay, those are all good matchups except for Tampa Bay. I think he can be a low-end RB1 producer collectively in those 3 games against Green Bay. Obviously a great opportunity. They're a terrible unit against the run. So something to like there. Aaron Jones or Gaskin this week. Definitely go with Aaron Jones. I know his ceiling has been down lately, but this week against Philly, I think he's got some risks. They struggled last year running the football, but I think it should be better than Gaskin. Booker or Miles Sanders. I'd go Miles Sanders against the Packers. Green Bay is one of the worst run stops in the league, only in front of Detroit, so Miles Sanders is the way to go there. Kamara or Booker. I have high expectations for Devontae Booker this week, but you can't sit Alvin Kamara for him. I think Kamara should finally, hopefully, if he's getting coached up, or if Taysom Hill's getting coached up, we should see Kamara get some work out of the backfield finally that we've been missing very much. Kenyon Drake, Kareem Hunt, or Jonathan Taylor this week. Need a win. Let's see. I think that this week your best bet is probably to go with Jonathan Taylor. I think their run stop, their whole defense collectively, top to bottom, is not very good. So I think that Jonathan Taylor can have a big day. Hopefully he doesn't get snubbed of his goal line carries from Trey Burton. That's been super annoying for me in some leagues this year. When JT gets down the 1 yard line, then they throw a flip pass to Trey Burton. That's a really big annoyance, but other than that, he should have a pretty good game. I think Hines will have a good game as well in PPR leagues. Do you think Dalvin Cook is going to eat up the offense because I'm starting Thielen, or should I start someone else? Dalvin Cook's going to get his touches. He's going to get his looks, but I think Adam Thielen will still be a productive player. I mean, we see Derrick Henry get 30 carries in a game, and A.J. Brown still has value. And so I think that the same goes for Thielen and Jefferson. Especially against a team like the Jags, I think they still have high value, so I definitely like those guys. Parker or A.J. Brown this week? I'm going with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is good to go with that hip injury. He is cleared to play that game and was at practice yesterday, so after he missed it on Thursday. Against Cleveland, their secondary's let up some big plays, and that is what A.J. Brown does well. Definitely go that route over Parker this week. JT or Hunt, really like Taylor in standard leagues. I agree, Reed. Thanks for stopping by the stream, man. I think JT against Houston is a great matchup. I'd definitely go that route. Justin Jefferson or A.J. Brown, that's another really interesting question, but due to the fact that I think we might see Dalvin Cook, I just talked about this, but I think that there is the chance. I mean, both of these are run-heavy teams. I think I just like Brown against the Cleveland Browns a slightly bit more than Justin Jefferson, but I expect them both to have very nice games. Do I play Fitzpatrick, or if Tua is back, Trubisky, or hope Lamar plays? So you're going to have to pay really close attention to this one, William. I think that there is a small chance that Lamar Jackson plays. He has not been ruled out and is eligible to return tomorrow, but I'm not necessarily so sure how realistic that is. I think that Fitzpatrick is your best bet, but you also have to keep a very close eye on that one because that is a game-time decision for Tua, so a lot of injuries. You're going to have to pay attention to that one. Hunter, Henry, or Goddard at tight end. Zach Ertz is expected to return this week, and I know Philly still runs 2 to 3 tight end sets, and they're all going to be involved, but I think that Hunter Henry is probably the better option this week just because I think you'll see some increased targets with the Pats looking to take away Keenan Allen. Tanyan or Ebron this week? I'd go Robert Tanyan against the Philly Eagles. I think Tanyan, 7 touchdowns this year, tight end 3 right now, and half PPR. He's a great option to go for. For those of you guys on the stream right now, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys haven't already, make sure you go down and hit the subscribe button to my channel. I'll be coming out with a lot of rankings videos and must-start players for you guys next week heading into the playoffs. So, quick little interruption there before I get into some more questions here. Half PPR, start 1, Zeke, Dobbins, or Gallman. I'm definitely sitting down Zeke this week. I do not trust him at all against the Ravens. And I think that Wayne Gallman, I really like that game against the Giants. I think he can have some pretty impressive numbers there. Against the Seattle Seahawks, excuse me. I think Gallman, if they stay in that game, we're looking at somewhere between 20, 24 touches. I mean, he's been very good as a starter for New York. And I think if they can control the pace of that game, I think it's going to be pretty tough to do, but he should be one of the better guys for running back twos this week. Should I start Sammy Watkins or Jacoby Myers? Half PPR. Let's see. Myers has the Chargers this week. Watkins has the Broncos. Sammy Watkins is actually just coming off an injury, but he ended up playing last week against Tampa Bay and was fairly decent, 4 for 38. So in a first game back, that's not terrible. I mean, obviously not fancy relevant numbers, but it at least shows he's being integrated back into that offense. And then your other guy was Jacoby Myers. Let's see how he's been doing lately. These are both streaming options, but guys that can be decent at times. 5 for 52 against the Cardinals last week, and obviously he had that 3-game stretch where he was pretty dang good there a couple weeks ago. So this is a tough one. I think ultimately I'll probably go with Jacoby Myers just because I think that Pats and Chargers game will be a little bit more competitive. And I could see the Chiefs blowing out the Broncos and not having to throw for the most part of that game. So I'd go Jacoby Myers by a slight margin there. Swift and Colts running backs have the best playoff schedule for running backs. That's fair, James. I would actually argue Derrick Henry has even better playoff scheduling here. Let's pull up Derrick Henry's playoff schedule. It's brutally fantastic for fantasy owners, and guys playing against him need to watch out. Jacksonville, Detroit, and Green Bay. He's got the 31st and 32nd ranked unit against the run in weeks 15 and 16. So obviously the bottom 2 teams in the league he's going to have up there on the schedule. And he's probably going to just run wild. I could see him going for multiple score games in all of those contests, 200 yards maybe in one of them. So as a Packer fan, I'm terrified to see Derrick Henry in week 15. Akers, Bell, White, or Zeke this week. I would stay away from Bell and White. Cam Akers had his best game of the season last week, but I think as much as I don't like starting Zeke this week, I'd actually probably have to advise you to go that route this week. He'll get his carries, but I think that that Baltimore front is pretty solid. But there is hope, I guess, because Trace McSorley is expected to be the starter, so we might not see it be quite as bad of a blowout as expected. Taysom Hill or Kyler Murray this week? I'm going to go with Taysom Hill for you here, Duncan. I think that Taysom Hill against the Falcons has the opportunity to run and throw the ball this week, and Kyler Murray has some injuries that he's dealing with and whatnot, and a very tough matchup. So, Jason, I would go with Wayne Gallman over Gaskin this week. Like I said, if New York can stay in that game against Seattle, I think he's going to get a lot of touches and has the opportunity to be a beast on the goal line. But Gaskin, coming off an injury, I'm a little bit worried about that one. Oh, did I... Sorry, I skipped over you, man. Mostert or Gallman in the other side of Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Hill, or Thielen. I need 3 wide receivers in fantasy. Have to pick one, Chubb or Eckler. Okay. There's a lot to this. I'm a little bit confused here. So I think you're asking Mostert or Gallman separately, so I'm going to go with Raheem Mostert there against the Bills. I think that's a good matchup for him, and we saw him be fairly impressive for his first game back in a while. So I liked that game. Raheem Mostert, definitely go there. You need 3 wide receivers of Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Hill, and Thielen. Now, I would go with Brown, Hill, and Thielen. Stay away from Julio Jones with that hamstring injury. And then Chubb or Eckler. That's a tough one. I think you got to go with Chubb, though, even though Eckler was so good last week in the receiving game. Nick Chubb against Tennessee should have quite the day. All right, let's scroll back down here and try to figure out where I was at. What's up, Backyard Heroes? I would go with Michael Thomas over Dobbins and Gaskin this week. I think in PPR leagues, he's going to get his looks this week, and he's probably going to have a nice reception total. So I like going that route this week. He had 9 for 104 against Atlanta 2 weeks ago. So against the Falcons, again, I think he should have another good game. Would I play Landry over Julio even if he plays because of that hammy injury? No, I would not, just because Jarvis Landry has not showed us that he can be dependable this year. He obviously is coming off one of his best games of the season last week, but I just don't think he's shown us quite enough over the course of the year to warrant him being started over Julio. But obviously, if this was like 3 years ago when he was still in Miami producing like a wide receiver 1, then maybe I would have went that route. But Julio right now, if he plays, is too good to sit down in most situations. JT Dobbins or Deontay Johnson in your flex. I'm going to have to go... hang on. I'm not really sure if this is JT or if it was a typo for J.K. Dobbins. If it's Jonathan Taylor, definitely go that route. I love that matchup against Houston this week. Otherwise, I would probably have to go with Deontay Johnson right now. He leads the Pittsburgh Steelers in targets, and he has a high reception count in the last 4 weeks here. He's been on a pretty good streak here the last month, so I like that matchup. Yeah, I agree, James. Don't chase the points. Go with Julio Jones. Oh, did I skip over you, Darius? I'm sorry, man. Let me scroll up here and try to find your comment. Here we go. Bench Julio. Okay, so you're wondering which one to bench, I believe. Julio, Debo, or Pittman. I would sit Pittman down of the 3. Obviously, if Julio doesn't play, you're going to have to sit him down. But I think Debo Samuel should have a nice game, and Michael Pittman's been slightly inconsistent. J.K. Dobbins or D-Hop in your flex this week. If it's PPR, I would just slightly go with DeAndre Hopkins here just because he is D-Hop, and he's going to get his looks, I think, or at least you would hope so. But like I said, I think that matchup's going to be pretty brutal. But standard leagues, J.K. Dobbins all day of the week. I think that Hopkins is super risky this week. Steven, your dad wants to know if he should play Des Bryant this week. And he is playing your stepdad. Wow. Okay, so I think that Des Bryant I don't think is fantasy relevant right now. I mean, we've seen him on the field, but his actual production hasn't really been anything fantastic. And even against the Cowboys, coming home party for Dez, I don't think it's going to happen. 4 for 28 against Tennessee and no catches against the Steelers. Not a solid option, I don't think. Derek Carr, Taysom Hill, man. He's going to have some nice numbers against the Falcons this week. Lamar Jackson or Taysom Hill this week. Lamar might not even play, so you got to put Taysom Hill in your lineups for now. But we'll have to stay tuned on that and see if Jackson plays, because I like that matchup against Dallas a lot. Yeah, no problem, James. Thanks for stopping around the stream, man, and for all of your comments and whatnot and the input you add in the comment section below. It's much appreciated here on the channel. Pick 2, Jarvis Landry, Pittman, Marquise Brown, or Henry Ruggs. This week, I like a lot of these matchups. I think these guys are all solid streaming players that you guys could put into your lineups, but I think that this is tough. I think you go Jarvis Landry against Tennessee. He's probably the most established player in the league at this point, and maybe not the most consistent guy, but none of those guys really are. So I think you go that route, coming off a hot game, and then Trace McSorley threw the ball to Marquise Brown a bit last week, so if he gets the start, he can be viable. But I think I'd actually probably prefer Henry Ruggs against the Jets. I think he can hit one deep over the top in that game. Yeah, that's a tough one. Oh. Do I like the Dolphins, Bears, or Raiders defense this week? What's up, Noah? Thanks for stopping around here on the stream. I think the Dolphins this week are a fantastic option for your lineups. Miami has the battered-up Bengals right now. Pretty much a quarterbackless wonder at this point, so definitely go with them. Miami's got to take away, and I think they've got one in every game this year, if I recall that stat correctly. So definitely go with the Dolphins this week against a very poorly productive Bengals offense. Ertz or Jordan Reed this week. I'm going to go – this one's tough. Jordan Reed's been decent without Kittle on the field. But I actually haven't really seen how he's been producing last 2 weeks here. Yeah, he's been pretty quiet. I think you got to go with Zach Ertz, even though it's a returning game and he might start off pretty slow. I think that's a tough option there. Jonathan Taylor or Wayne Gallman this week. I would go with JT just because I don't expect the Colts to be blown out. I really like Gallman if they stay in the game against Seattle, but I think that there's definitely a world where they get blown out without Danny Dimes, so JT's your safer option this week. Pick 3, Monty, Gaskin, Booker, or Parker. Oh, and Gallman. Okay, David Montgomery's got to be in there for me this week against the number 32nd ranked rushing defense of the Lions. That's a great matchup, something you love to see in fantasy, so Montgomery, definitely put him in this week. Booker, I think, has to get that next spot against the Jets. I think the Raiders are going to run that game and run that clock down and just pound the football down their throats. And then that last spot's pretty interesting. It really depends if this is a standard league or a PPR. If it's standard, I'm going to go with Gallman because I think he's a highly effective threat on the goal line. But if we're looking at PPR, maybe you want to go Devontae Parker if Fitzpatrick's your starter. Pittman or Snell this week, I'm going to have to go with Benny Snell. Pittman has been good in flashes and in stretches. We haven't seen him be too consistent, but he has been a decent option at times. And I think moving forward, he's got a pretty bright future. But I think Benny Snell, even in a tough matchup, probably the most reliable option there. Pick 2, McLaurin, Jefferson, or Woods, must-win week for you. So I think that I really like Justin Jefferson this week. But of the 3, I would actually choose to sit him down if this is a must-win game for you. McLaurin, I expect to have a great game. He's been matchup-proof. He's been quarterback-proof. We've seen him produce with 3 different guys this season. But I think you go Woods and McLaurin. McLaurin's going to get his numbers against the Steelers. And then the reason I pick Woods over Jefferson for you in a must-win game is Robert Woods has a safer floor. I think that we have the issue with Justin Jefferson that sometimes he doesn't get too many looks because they hammer the football with Dalvin Cook. But I think that in LA, Robert Woods gets some carries. I mean, he gets jet sweeps, end arounds, lots of wide receiver screens, and he's a very good and polished route runner. So I think your safest option is to go with Woods with that nice floor, and McLaurin's always got a great ceiling. Kamara or Eckler this week. Honestly, from what we've seen lately, I think Austin Eckler is back. This guy is going to be a PPR monster the rest of the season. And while we can hope and have the expectation that Kamara gets more involved as a receiver in that Saints offense this week, we haven't actually seen that go into effect because he's only had one reception in his last 2 games, and it was for -2 yards. So in terms of this week without Brees on the field, I got to go with Eckler. But moving forward, the instant Drew Brees walks back on that field, Kamara is a top 3 running back in fantasy again. And then for your flex, James Robinson or Michael Thomas. PPR leagues, I could see you going towards Michael Thomas because he's going to get that opportunity. He had 50 of the 78 Saints passing yards last week, so I think he definitely is a guy with a safe floor. But James Robinson, probably the more dependable guy and where I would end up going. Herbert or Tannehill this week, I'd go Tannehill, Jack. I think that Herbert, the rest of the season, is better. I think these are both top 12 QB plays, but this week I like Tannehill against the Browns better than I like a young quarterback in Herbert against Belichick's Patriots defense. Start 2, Sterling Shepard, Juju Smith, Amari Cooper, or DJ Chark. I'm going to guide you towards DJ Chark, first of all, against Minnesota. Very young secondary. I think they can exploit that slightly. I'd be all over Shepard this week if Danny Dimes was playing, but that's not going to be the case, so got to stay away from him. And that leaves us with Juju and Amari Cooper. Both have tough matchups. Man, that's a really tough one. It's kind of a toss-up. Maybe you end up going with Cooper because he's kind of got that breakaway speed, and I guess you could catch one underneath and go for a house call. So that's a tough choice, though. Pick one wide receiver and a flex for your team. Michael Thomas, D-Hop, Lockett, Deontay Johnson, and J.K. Dobbins for standard scoring. Thanks for the comment and question, Jake. I think I would pick for your top wide receiver of that bunch, Michael Thomas this week. But best matchup, best floor, I think, of those guys. And then at your flex, I would stay away from D-Hop. I would probably stay away from Lockett as well, unfortunately, because of matchups. And I see the Seahawks blowing out the Giants potentially, so there might not be much reason to pass the ball. Standard scoring, probably go with J.K. Dobbins then. A tough matchup against Washington for Johnson. I can see him getting his looks and receptions in PPR, but I think in terms of the actual yardage output he'll have, he probably needs a touchdown this week. So I'd go Dobbins and MT. Who do you like best out of Antonio Brown, Jacoby Myers, and Sterling Shepard? All right. So I think out of those 4 options there, Antonio Brown's on a bye week this week, so you probably got to stay away from him. And I think I would honestly go Jacoby Myers over Shepard, just because Shepard doesn't have a quarterback this week other than Colt McCoy. Pick 2, must-win game for you, McLaurin or Jefferson and Woods. Didn't I just answer this one? I think McLaurin and Woods are your guys to go with there. Really high ceiling with McLaurin, pretty safe floor in Woods. Is Elliott a sit this week? And do you think Lamar plays, or should I stream Fitzpatrick or Trubisky? Elliott is absolutely a set this week against the Ravens. I think that's a very tough front for him to play this week in a very unfavorable matchup. And then when you look at Lamar Jackson, they actually haven't really ruled him out to this point in the week. We don't know if he's going to start. Trace McSorley is expected to play as the Ravens quarterback, and I think that's a risky situation to bet on Lamar playing. So I think in an ideal world you start Fitzpatrick here, but that's also a tough gamble because the Dolphins have a game-time decision with Tua, and if Tua ends up going, he will be the starter. So I would plan on playing Fitzpatrick. If all goes well, Lamar might play, but I wouldn't bet on that too heavily. Trubisky, I'd stay away from those. Start 3, Kamara, Gaskin, Booker, Gore, and Hines. I'm going to have to go with Kamara. Even though he's been a little bit rough the past couple weeks, I think it's really hard to sit him down on my bench. And then I'll go with Booker and Hines for your last 2 spots. Really like Devontae Booker, and the work we're going to see him get this week. And then Nyheim Hines in that passing game I think can be pretty effective as well. Pick 3, Chris Carson, Raheem Mostert, Myles Gaskin, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And pick 1 between Lamb, Juju, and Boyd. You need to win this week for a playoff bye. And then you've got some quarterback advice you would like in the next part. So I'm going to go with Chris Carson, Raheem Mostert for you, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Oh, pick one. Okay, never mind. I'll go with probably Raheem Mostert is honestly the guy I'd pick here if it's a must-win game. He's got that highest ceiling for you, but if you're looking for a safer floor, probably Chris Carson's the option to go, but I really like Mostert this week. I'd go that route. And then if you need Oh no, okay, I'm losing it, guys. So it was pick 3. So go Carson, Raheem Mostert, and CEH at running back. Pick 1 wide receiver. I would go with probably CeeDee Lamb over Boyd this week. And then at your quarterback spot, I'd go Herbert by a slight margin too over Kyler Murray. I really don't like that matchup against the Rams. Should I trade Lamar and Chubb for Kyler and Aaron Jones? I don't think so, and here's why. Lamar Jackson has a great fantasy playoff schedule, and I really like his upside. If he doesn't play this week, he will be playing next week and on the field. And Nick Chubb, he gets a high touch total every single week. And then the thing that kind of scares me away from the other side of that deal is Kyler Murray has that shoulder injury and a tough matchup in Week 16. Start to just sub to the channel. Thanks, man. I really appreciate you, Tanner. Thanks for stopping around here on the stream and becoming part of the SFS channel. I appreciate all of you guys that stick around here. It means a lot to me, and I hope we can keep growing here. So, anyways, he wants to pick 2, Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, Devontae Booker, and David Johnson. I'm going to have to go. This is a tough one. You've got 3 guys I really like here. Miles Sanders, I think, has to be in the lineup, first of all, for me. He's been really struggling lately, but against the 31st ranked Packers defense against the run, I think he's a must-start player. And then David Montgomery and Devontae Booker is a very close one for me, but I honestly think you got to go David Montgomery against the dead last ranked Detroit Lions running defense. Devontae Booker, I think, will have a great game and a lot of touches, but being a handcuff, he's obviously not the starter for a reason. David Montgomery is Chicago's starter, so I think you go that route. Nyheim Hines or James White this week. I'm going to go with Nyheim Hines for you, man. I think that against Houston, he has the opportunity to catch the ball pretty effectively and do some nice things with the football in his hands. I think he'll get a fair amount of looks here, maybe even 10 total touches on the day. 10 to 12 touches would be my estimate between his work on the ground and through the air. And I think James White has been a little bit less consistent than I expected. Oh, standard scoring for you. Tanner, I still think I'd stay the same way. Yeah, I still think I would stay with those 2 guys, even in standard leagues. Andrew's got a must-win situation this week. He's wondering about Booker, Antonio Gibson, or David Johnson. DJ, I think, going forward, is an effective player in lineups, but this week against the Colts, coming off a pretty severe concussion, I think I would err on the side of Booker and Gibson. Not a big fan of Antonio Gibson's matchup this week, but I think he will definitely catch some passes and have some value in that part of the game. And then we'll probably also see Booker get a lot of touches as well, and hopefully he gets in the end zone. Half PPR, you've got Miles Sanders in the flex, and you've got Gaskin, Edmonds, Chark, and Kirk. Replace Sanders with one of these. Actually, man, I'm going to be completely honest, Jonathan. I think you're best off with keeping Miles Sanders in, unless for some reason this is Emmanuel Sanders. But if it's Miles Sanders against the Packers, this is one of the best matchups he's going to see all year. I really liked Miles Sanders all year long. I think that there's definitely, it's warranted why people are panicking on him right now. But I think that in terms of his fantasy playoff schedule, if he can produce and show you guys what he can really do this week, I think he deserves to be a starter the rest of the way. But, you know, if he doesn't do well this week, I'll eat it, because if he can't produce against the Packers, then that's a huge red flag. But if that is Emmanuel Sanders for some reason, I really like DJ Chark against the Vikings. Running back 2 this week, you're wondering about J.K. Dobbins or David Montgomery. I'm going to go with David Montgomery for you, Shelton. I think that against the Lions, he's got a great opportunity to produce. And against the Packers, just one spot ahead of them in terms of rushing defense. I expected him to not do too well because I thought that line for Chicago was so beat up and just terrible. But Montgomery found space and was pretty dang good in that game. So I go David Montgomery there. Dobbins, Edmonds, or Bernard this week. It's a great question, Timon. I think I'd go with Dobbins. Ultimately, Edmonds we've seen be very good in stunts this year. And Bernard, I think, has value, but without Burrow in the lineup, I don't like the Bengals at all this week, especially against Miami. So Dobbins is the way to go there. Start 3, Gibson, Chubb, Drake, CEH. I'm assuming that's David Johnson or Myles Gaskin. I'm going to have to say Chubb, Clyde Edwards for you this week. If he plays through that illness, that's something to keep your eye on and monitor. And then in that last spot, it's a tough one. I think I'd ultimately go Gibson over Drake. Antonio Gibson, tough matchup against the Steelers, but what he does better than Drake and makes me favor him a little bit more is that he catches the football very well. What's up, Roy Kim? Thanks for stopping around on the stream here. Glad to have you here on the live. Yeah, I agree with you there, Armando. I think that's the way you go there. I have Rudolph and have claimed Noah Fant off the waivers. Should I grab Zach Ertz in case he gets at least 10 points? I believe you're in PPR, right, Roy? I think Zach Ertz is probably the best option of the bunch, and at least in terms of what we've seen his fantasy ceiling be in the past, probably the best tight end option there. But this season he's been very underwhelming, even when he wasn't injured. He caught a touchdown in week 1, but his yardage hasn't been there all year long. So hopefully he's finally healthy and can produce against Green Bay. Deontay Johnson or Julio Jones at wide receiver, and Miles Sanders, Swift, or Kareem Hunt at flex. So DeAndre Swift is listed as doubtful right now, so I'd be extremely careful about putting him in your lineups. I think ultimately, though, Miles Sanders gets my start at flex for your team. And then at wide receiver, I'd go Julio Jones over Deontay if Julio plays. All right, you traded away DeAndre Hopkins, and you got Goddard. And you got Kelsey and Debo. And PPR, is this a good trade? And I actually think that I talked through this with you in the comment section of one of my trade episodes a while back when I was still doing those. Those are probably my most popular videos on the channel, but most people's trade deadlines have already passed, so I moved into some other content areas here. But let's take a look at Hopkins' closing schedule, because I'm pretty sure it's very rough. San Fran Week 16, not a great matchup for him. If you guys have your fantasy playoffs running through Week 17, that is a terrible game against the Rams as well. Philadelphia, he's probably going to see Darius Slay, another tough game for Hopkins. And then this week, obviously, against the Rams and Jalen Ramsey, not a great matchup there. So Kelsey, the best tight end in the game right now, and with Kittle out of fantasy lineups, you definitely got the top player in this deal. And then Deebo Samuel, he's a very salvageable and useful piece in lineups. So I think that was a pretty darn good trade for you, considering the schedule for D-Hop and what you got back at tight end. Debo or Gallman in your flex at PPR, or at your flex this week in full PPR. I think since this is PPR, I would maybe lean towards Debo slightly. I think he'll do pretty good against the Bills, and I've talked about on the stream here how I'm a little bit concerned about Gallman and those Giants getting blown out, and that's definitely a legitimate concern against the Seahawks without a quarterback other than Colt McCoy. Pick one, full PPR, Jonathan Taylor, Devontae Booker, or Wayne Gallman. This is a tough one. I'm going to axe Wayne Gallman out of there right away just because of what I just mentioned about him. But JT, I think he can run all over Houston, and we've seen him be involved in the screen game for those Colts running backs, so he definitely has some receiving volume there. Las Vegas running backs, though, we don't really see typically get too much passing work, but they are playing the Jets, so he could find the end zone as well. I think I go JT by a very small margin. Either of those guys will be pretty nice starters. Safest route for your team, Cam Akers or James White? Emmanuel, let me take a look here at how James White has been doing since he came back from his personal leave here. And okay, so he's been pretty effective. He has 10 points in half PPR in week 11, 13.5 in week 12. So he's obviously getting the football. 2 touchdowns last week, though. really stinted his value because he only had 6 touches. I think right now, in terms of Cam Akers, he's probably a slightly better option. McVay obviously uses a committee system, and he feeds the hot hand. And right now, that's Cam Akers. He had the best week of the Rams running backs against the 49ers. He had 9 carries for 84 yards in a tub. So I think Cam Akers might be slightly safer because he's going to see more volume. But maybe in PPR, I could justify James White having a little bit more safe volume as a receiver. Pick 1, full PPR, Jonathan Taylor, Devontae. I think I actually literally just did that one. Yeah, my bad. Is Henry almost a guaranteed win in the playoffs? So obviously you have to put the right pieces around Derrick Henry, but if you have a solid RB2, a very good wide receiver 1, and a decent quarterback, I mean, you're well on your way to a fantasy championship. Obviously, there's going to be teams with other really great games, so you have to pick your lineups wisely, but if you have Derrick Henry on your roster right now, especially in standard leagues where you're not worrying about people getting free points from catches, you might be running through the competition because the matchups are so good. Colt McCoy is going to go nuts on Jamal Adams. Yeah, he could. I mean, or he could get smoked a lot of times by the Seattle pass rush that's actually been very improved the last couple weeks. I know if you guys on Instagram follow NFL memes, they hate on Jamal Adams quite a bit. They have a lot of Blitz Boy memes, as they like to call him, because he's gotten fried in coverage quite a bit this season. And looks like he's running around headless out there sometimes and looks like a goon, but he hits pretty hard when he makes the tackle. Start 2, A-Rob, Robert Woods, Deontay Johnson. Got to go with Woods and A-Rob here, 2 super safe options, and guys I think have really high ceilings this week. A-Rob's got the Lions, great matchup there. Jeff Okuda's been banged up recently, and if he doesn't play, even better. And then Robert Woods, great matchup against the Cardinals this week, super safe floor as always, so that's where I'd go with that. Jeremiah, I think you go Deebo Samuel this week over Michael Pittman. Deebo Samuel is probably the more safe route because as a second-year player, he is fully integrated into that system, and we see him have a role in that offense week in and week out when he's on the field. Michael Pittman, very talented rookie, great matchup, but very inconsistent so far this season. Forgot to ask about Trubisky or Kirk Cousins. This week, man, I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins. I think against Jacksonville, he can tear that secondary up, and he's going to be fairly comfortable in the pocket. Play action should be highly effective for Cousins this week. I think they're going to obviously have great success running the ball with Dalvin Cook, and then that sets up great play action game. Jefferson might have a really nice couple of deep balls off that this week. Pick 3 running backs and 2 wide receivers. You've got JT, CEH, Sanders, Mostert, Deontay Johnson, and McLaurin and Ridley. Wow, you've got a loaded group, it sounds like. For your running backs, I'm going to have to go Mostert, Sanders, and Jonathan Taylor. I think those guys have the best options there. And then at wide receiver, I think I'm going to have to go with McLaurin and Ridley for you. I think Ridley, with that Julio Jones injury, sees an uptick in his touches. And McLaurin's always got a great ceiling. He's matchup proof at this point. T. Higgins or Todd Gurley, half PPR this week. Todd Gurley's questionable with that knee arthritis right now. So I'd be very, very cautious about him. And then T. Higgins doesn't really have a quarterback anymore, unfortunately. So that's something you got to be pretty dang careful about too. So I think ultimately, let's see, what was your scoring? Did you say it was PPR? Where did it go? Half PPR. So I think if Gurley plays, he's got the Saints though. I gotta go T. Higgins, man. If Todd Gurley doesn't get in the end zone this week, it's gonna be ugly. I don't even think he'll play, honestly. But T. Higgins at least has a chance to get some receptions. I think Todd Gurley is in a point right now in that offense where he's super touchdown dependent. Only 2 games this year with 63 yards rushing or more. He's been a touchdown dependent play all year. He's outplayed his draft stock right now in terms of what he's done this season on the field, but that's a main result of his touchdown count. Claypool or Cooper this week. I'm going to go with Chase Claypool. I do not like Amari Cooper against Marlon Humphrey this week. I think that's something that people should look to stay away from. Ayuk or Hines at your flex this week, man. I'm going to take Nyheim Hines. Especially if you're in a PPR league, I think he's going to do a lot of damage to that Texans defense as a receiver, and I think he'll get some nice running attempts sprinkled in there as well. Jonathan Taylor or Terry McLaurin in your PPR league this week. Dylan, I'd go with Terry McLaurin week in and week out. He's a must-start player at this point in the year. He's been matchup proof. He has not been QB dependent. He's been fantastic this year. Probably one of the better second-year wide receivers, and that's saying something. Probably DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown are a little bit better, but Scary Terry's been pretty dang good this year. Okay, Gibson, Montgomery, Booker, Gallman, Dobbins, or Parker and Standard need 2 running backs and a flex. Justin, I'm going to have to send your way. David Montgomery, Devontae Booker need to be penciled in there immediately. Great matchups for those guys, great game situations. And then for that last spot, this is a standard league too. That last spot, I think I would either give to Gallman or Dobbins, whichever you think has a better chance of getting in the end zone. I think Dobbins has a great opportunity against the Cowboys, but coming off of having COVID, I'm not so sure what his involvement will be in that offense, just seeing that he's missed a week and a half. What's up, iBrazy TV? How you doing, man? I'm doing pretty good. Jerry Jeudy or James Conner? Well, James Conner, let's look up. He actually is listed as out right now still with him having COVID. So I think if that's your situation, you're kind of forced to having to go with Jeudy. Right now, Benny Snell is the expected starter in that game. So I would stay up to date on that. I'll probably send out a tweet if we see a lot of guys miss this week, and the guys who are very important missing games. But if it's James Conner, you're pretty much backed into a corner here, and you kind of have to start Jerry Jeudy because I don't think he'll play. Landry or Pittman in full PPR at your flex this week. Justin, I think you go with Jarvis Landry. They've both been inconsistent, but I really love Jarvis against the Titans this week, and I think that he can be a crutch for Baker Mayfield to lean on. Elliott or Jonathan Taylor, full PPR. I'm going to go with JT this week. Elliott's got a tough game against Baltimore. I'm not a big fan of that one, so JT's the way to go. Pick 3 in your half PPR league. 1 wide receiver, 1 running back, and a flex. Gibson, Swift. Swift's out this week, or at least doubtful at this point. So, but you do have Robinson. So I go James Robinson in your running back spot. And then at wide receiver and flex, I would probably go with Ridley and Antonio Gibson by. That's tough. So this is full PPR or half PPR. Yeah, so half PPR, I'm going to go with Antonio Gibson just because I think Deontay Johnson's ceiling is somewhat limited. And pick up Rams D. Yeah, I'd pick up the Rams D too. I think that's a great route to go. Wait. I just saw a question I really want to answer. Is Young Hoku, there it is, the MVP of fantasy? I mean, he has the most points in the NFL this season. I think Young Hoku, he's been in my leagues that I have kickers. I try to keep kickers separate from my fantasy leagues just because I think it's kind of a crapshoot at times. And we see a lot of kickers just like hit or miss. And it's a really terrible way to lose your week. And if you win because of a kicker, it doesn't feel the greatest. But Young Hoku's been excellent. I've got a couple leagues with kickers in them. In every league I have kickers in, I own Young Hoku simply because of the name. It's just fantastic. He scores a lot of points every week. The Falcons haven't been too great in the red zone without Todd Gurley. They kick a lot of field goals. He deserves my MVP vote for fantasy this season. Just playing there, but yeah, definitely should go to a running back. Probably Derrick Henry if he finishes off the season hot. But thanks for the sub, man, Kazim. I really appreciate you here on the channel. Nyheim Hines or Jonathan Taylor this week? That is a great question, Owen. And here's my answer for that one. Nyheim Hines is the go-to guy for PPR this week for me in fantasy, and Jonathan Taylor is my go-to in standard leagues. I think both of these guys are both very viable plays. Don't necessarily have the highest ceilings, but I think are guys with reasonable floors and pretty darn safe guys. So depending on your scoring format is where I'd go this week. Andrew's wondering about Kyler Murray or Ryan Tannehill this week. I'm going to have to lean towards the side of Ryan Tannehill. If Kyler Murray shows that he can go off this week against the Rams, that's great, but the risk factor there this week is too high. AC joint sprain in his shoulder, Jalen Ramsey matching up against his top wide receiver and might take him out of the game for most of it. I think that's a pretty tough situation to be in there, so I would try and be safe this week in that route. And Ryan Tannehill against the Browns secondary has some pretty nice opportunity with A.J. Brown over the top. Kyle Rudolph or Hunter Henry in full PPR. I'm going to go with Hunter Henry this week, man. I think Hunter Henry should see an increase in targets against the Pats. Based off what I'm projecting, I'm expecting Belichick to try and take away Keenan Allen from Justin Herbert and make him do things he's not comfortable doing. And so I think what that means is Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler see an uptick in receptions. What's going on, Tomas from Panama? He wants some tight end advice, and he's got Dallas Goedert and Jordan Reed. I'm going to tell you this week, man, I think you should go for Dallas Goedert. Philadelphia and Carson Wentz have been the best when targeting tight ends in that offense. So I think that's your safest bet this week. And even with Ertz coming back this week, I still think that that's a fairly advantageous matchup for them. Okay, I lost my spot. I got to find where I was at here. Okay. Flex, full PPR, Chase Claypool or Wayne Gallman. In your PPR leagues, I think usually you give a slight increase in projection to a wide receiver, obviously, because they're getting more passing work. Chase Claypool has a tough matchup, but I think he still deserves consideration just because, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to throw the football. Wayne Gallman, I think, is definitely more of a standard play, so I think I'd lean Chase Claypool slightly. Who do I start in your flex this week? In PPR, Claypool or Gaskin, similar situation. I'd go with Claypool just because he's a wideout. I think this one's an easier choice because Gaskin's coming off injury. Half PPR, Dobbins or Claypool. Lots of Chase Claypool questions going on here. This one I think is a little bit different. I love J.K. Dobbins' matchup this week against the Cowboys, so I would actually go J.K. Dobbins over Claypool. Melvin Gordon or Giovanni Bernard in half PPR this week. I'm going to say probably go Melvin Gordon, even though he's been pretty hit or miss. Gio and the Bengals against the Dolphins, I think, is a tough matchup this week, so I like Gordon a little bit more. Phil Rivers or Murray this week. That Indy offense isn't terribly explosive, and even though I like the matchup, I still think even in a tough matchup, when I've been advising against Kyler Murray all week, I think this is one of the situations where you stick with your star player. With a much lowered ceiling this week, but still a guy who's going to put up some numbers, and I expect it to be better than it was last week. Beasley, Ayuk, Lazard, or Boyd in full PPR. I really like this situation. I'm going to go with Cole Beasley, even though I'm a Packer fan, and I think Lazard is a really sneaky sleeper this week. Cole Beasley, Josh Allen, those guys are on the same page week in and week out, and he doesn't always have the highest output, but John Brown's on the IR right now and out of the lineup. I think he has the opportunity to be highly involved. And for a guy, he threw a touchdown pass last week. So, sneaky play, tough matchup, though. I'll still go with Cole Beasley. Gallman or Hunt in your full PPR league. I think this is a situation when you take Kareem Hunt. Obviously, Nick Chubb is going to get the bulk of the carries, but Gallman, I think, is a more standard-leaning play, and Kareem Hunt's receiving volume could put him over the edge in terms of that matchup stack there. Snell or Cam Akers this week. Cam Akers is the hot hand in LA right now, but it's still committee, and I know Benny Snell is going to get his touches if Connor doesn't suit up, so I'd go Benny Snell there. Sterling Shepard or Deebo Samuel. I'm going to have to go with Deebo because Sterling doesn't have Daniel Jones at quarterback this week. James Conner, J.K. Dobbins, Naheem Hines, Akers, or David Johnson. Which two should I start this week? If you're in a PPR league, I am definitely going to go with Hines in that group. And probably J.K. Dobbins because I don't expect James Conner to play this week. Hines and J.K. Dobbins have the best matchups, and our guys I think can both catch the football. Cam Akers a bit risky because of that committee. Cam Akers or Jerry Jeudy though. Jerry Jeudy against the Chiefs. That's a tough one. I think maybe then you lean the safer route of going. That's a tough one for me in standard leagues. I'd go Cam Akers. In PPR, I'd go Jerry Jeudy. Being the top receiving threat in Denver, I think there's a world where they shut down Jeudy, but we'll see about that. Rest of season in PPR, Robert Woods or Justin Jefferson? That's a great question, Sam. Let me take a look at their rest of season schedules here. I know Minnesota has a couple rough games in the playoffs, but those are mainly tough run defenses, so I think they might actually air it out a bit more. Justin Jefferson, Rest of the year has Tampa Bay, Jacksonville this week, but in the playoffs he's got Tampa Bay, Chicago, and New Orleans. New Orleans and Tampa Bay particularly are very, very good against the run. So I think we might have to see Kirk throw a bit more on those games. And for a team that is kind of in the hunt for the playoffs right now, they might be looking for they're going to be looking to win at all costs. So I don't think the Vikings are going to mail their season in. They're going to be trying to compete in those games. And then your other guy in that situation was Woods. The Rams, the rest of the season, they've got New England, New York, and Seattle. I think the safer option the rest of the season is Robert Woods. I think I'd go that way by a little bit. I think Robert Woods is one of the safer guys in fantasy, in my opinion. And Justin Jefferson's been fantastic as a rookie. And I think we can project big things for him next year. But the rest of the way, I think Woods is slightly more dependable. Snell or Hines this week, Brady. I think I'd go with Nyheim Hines. Snell has a tough matchup. I think he's slightly touchdown dependent. And I think that Hines can do work as a receiver. Rodgers or Russell Wilson. This week, Rodgers has Philly and Wilson has the Giants. That's a tough one. I think both of these guys are going to put up top-end QB numbers. But Philly, their defense is probably a little bit better than New York's. Oops, sorry guys, I just got a call. I should probably get things wrapped up here soon. I think I go Russell Wilson this week just for the fact that he's got the better matchup. I think by a slight margin. He's got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, whereas Rodgers only has Adams. So I think that's the route I'd end up going. Pittman or Gaskin this week in full PPR. I'm going to go with Gaskin. I like I said, I like Pittman, but he's been inconsistent. So I think that's the way you go. Even coming off an injury, I think Gaskin will get more touches. Deontay or Mostert this week in your full PPR league. I think I go Mostert against the Bills. I really like Mostert's value. I think he's going to return to kind of that RB1 status we saw early on in the year from him. Raheem Mostert was putting up great numbers before he got injured both times this year. And Deontay Johnson, I think, is a high ceiling guy, but someone we've seen have a lower floor at times. 1 second, guys. I got to send a text here. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, you guys. I was just texting my family there. Okay. So, wow. Hold on a second. Gurley or Corey Davis at flex this week. I'm not so sure we can depend on Todd Gurley playing and actually suiting up in this game. And if he does, it's a really tough matchup for him against the Saints. So that's something I would try and stay clear of. Corey Davis, though, he has a very nice matchup, I would say. And against the Browns, I really like the production that he could have in that offense. So I think Corey Davis is the route to go this week. Thoughts on Evan Ingram and PPR? I think Evan Ingram is probably the best pass catcher in that Giants offense for certain. I think that they have some options there. Slayton's pretty solid, and Shepard's pretty good as well. But without Daniel Jones, I think they all take a hit this week and are not the most dependable guys. So I would stay clear of Giants this week. Jacobs out. Start Lindsey or Boston Scott. Also, I have Sanders starting. I think you got to go with Philip Lindsay. I mean, Boston Scott is a great handcuff when he's out of the lineup, but Miles Sanders, I think, is going to get the load this week. And then, actually, the Eagles also elevated Jordan Howard off the practice squad, so he's a guy that I could see maybe stealing some goal line carries as well. I don't think he should be started or picked up in fantasy yet, but keep an eye on him for my waiver wire video next week. He could have a role in that. But I certainly don't think he's going to take over that backfield and start over Miles Sanders. Mahomes or Josh Allen for the rest of the season, I got to go with Mahomes. Pat Mahomes gets his numbers regardless of who he's playing. And he's the best, most talented quarterback in the league right now. As a Packer fan, I admit he's better than Aaron Rodgers. He's better than Russell Wilson, I think, at this point. So you got to go with Patrick Mahomes. Lockett or McLaurin? I got to go with McLaurin this week, I think, and the rest of the season. He's been too good this year to pass up on, and I think he's probably a guy who can go out there and win some leagues for some teams. I'm going to answer a couple more questions, you guys. I'm going to be streaming until 5 o'clock, and then I'm going to get off here. 10 more minutes. I'll answer as many questions as I can, and then I'll be heading out of here. Pick 2 to start, Kamara, Aaron Jones, or Nick Chubb. I'm going to have to go this week with Kamara and Nick Chubb. Last year against the Eagles front, the Packers struggled to run the football. I love Aaron Jones the rest of the season, but I think Nick Chubb's more dependable this week. And then I'm actually projecting Kamara to hopefully get back on track and get some more reception yards and opportunities this week. Should my RBs be Devontae Booker, or wait, what? Devontae Booker, Deebo Samuel, Kamara, or Raheem Mostert? I think I'd go with probably... I'm kind of confused by our question, man. I don't know how many people I'm supposed to pick, but I'd say my top 3 is what I'll give you. I'd go Kamara 1, Mostert 2, and Booker 3. DJ Chark or Devontae Parker this week. I'm going to have to go with Chark against the Vikings, and I think there's actually a chance Gardner Minshew comes back this week. Let me check in on that. That would be something interesting to see this week for fantasy purposes. And so they're actually going to go with Mike Glennon this week regardless. He is healthy, but they're going to go with Mike Glennon. Glennon played decent last week. I think that Chark definitely has some lineup value, so I'd go with him. But Parker does see a spike in production, I think, with Fitzpatrick at quarterback. Rose is wondering about Aaron Jones and Chubb for... Oh, sorry, that was someone answering another person's comment. Dobbins or Taylor this week? I'm going to go with JT by a hair. I think that Jonathan Taylor can put up some really nice numbers against the Texans. I think Dobbins can as well, but Taylor is slightly more dependable. Lockett or McLaurin? I'm going to go with McLaurin. The matchup and his production this season has been too good to sit him down. So I think Terry McLaurin's a must-start the rest of the year. I offered Josh Allen, Josh Jacobs, and Devontae Booker from Mahomes and got rejected. Who got the better deal out of that? I have a lot of ammo, so that's why I put Jacobs in there. I think you're giving up a ton of value by putting Josh Allen and a running back one and a handcuff together for one quarterback who is only a really slight upgrade over Josh Allen. Obviously, Mahomes, I think, is my QB1. So I think he's a guy who it needs to be on teams, but yeah, I think that's a little bit too much value to give up for Mahomes, but I see why you did it. If you have a lot of firepower on your team, I think that's a viable option to go about on your team. Hurst or Dallas Goedert this week? I'm going to have to go with Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert has the Packers. Ertz is coming back this week, but the Saints have been brutal. Their defense has been too good, and I think that's not a team you want to play players against. Murray or Tannehill this week? I'm going to have to go with Ryan Tannehill against the Titans, against the Browns. Obviously, Tannehill plays for the Titans. Kyler Murray's got a tough matchup this week against the Rams. I don't like that matchup at all, so I think Tannehill definitely needs to start. Tyler Boyd, Aguilar, or Damian Harris for the flex in half PPR. I'm going to have to say Nelson Aguilar this week. I don't love the Bengals matchup at all. And then Damian Harris, not too much of a PPR play. So Aguilar against the Jets this week, I can see having a pretty nice game. Kirk Cousins or Cam Newton, win and you're in. Yeah, I'm in the same situation this week in one of my leagues, Mitchell. I've had a lot of injuries all year long. So I'm looking for a big win to get in this week. And I think the route to go for you is Kirk Cousins against the Jags is a very great matchup. So I think that's a great way to go. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, two great players to throw the football to. So, and then Cam Newton doesn't really have many guys to pass to, only 4 passing touchdowns this season. I don't want to go that route. You think CEH will suit up Do you think CEH will suit up for this week's game, and then Booker over Drake in full PPR? Yeah, I'd go with Devontae Booker over Drake this week. I think the matchup is better for Devontae Booker, and then CEH. I think he's dealing with an illness, so as long as they don't think it's too severe, I think he will suit up and play. It's not COVID, obviously. Otherwise, he would be out of there. But with the COVID protocols, obviously, every illness, the severity of it is like increased, and they weigh more heavily on it right now. So I think he'll end up suiting up, but I would definitely stay tuned on that because I'm not a Broncos insider. My opinion is that he will play, but obviously that's no given fact right now. What do I think about Gaskin this week? I think Myles Gaskin doesn't have too much competition for touches this week, and against the Bengals, who they might route because their defense is so solid, and Cincinnati doesn't have much of an offense right now. I think that's a great option if you have him in your flex. But a lot of people on the stream so far have had options I think are even better. So you can go about starting Gaskin this week. I'm a little bit worried about him because of that injury that he's coming off of, but I think he's definitely a viable play. You have CMC, Aaron Jones, and Eckler, so you tried to move Jacobs. Craziest 10-man league I've ever had. Thanks for the help, by the way. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I think that it's viable to move off Josh Jacobs, especially if you had those other three guys and you're in a PPR league. So then it's reasonable. Look to go out and get the best quarterback in the league and the best fantasy quarterback. Then it's reasonable. No problem, Mitchell. Thanks for stopping around on the stream here as we wrap things up. Pick 2 out of DJ Chark, Gaskin, and Devontae Parker. I'm going to have to go with Chark and probably Gaskin, honestly. Devontae Parker has been inconsistent this year. He's been pretty good at points, but not really close to what he was last year. DJ Chark, I like the matchup. Pittman, Shepard, Drake, Hines, pick 1, RB and 1 flex. I'd have to go with Hines probably, and probably Drake and Hines. I think that both of those guys could find a way into the end zone this week. And Kenyon Drake in the ground game might be the best option for the Cardinals this week. Are you sure about Murray? Even if he scores just 1 touchdown, he could get 30 rushing yards. Yeah, I mean, Kyler Murray, the rushing value is there, but the thing that concerns me is with that shoulder, he hasn't been running as much because if he gets popped, I mean, it's going to be a struggle, and he's going to be hurting after that. So definitely something to keep your eye on. I think that if he produces this week, that's a great sign. If he runs the football a lot this week, that's a great sign. But I'm very concerned about him coming into that Rams game. A couple more questions here. Julio Jones or Jarvis Landry. You have McLaurin as your first. Smart move there, Daniel. I think that Landry and Julio, I'd go Julio, but McLaurin's a must-start guy. Jarvis Landry, coming off his best game of the season, has a good matchup, but Julio Jones is Julio Jones, and I don't think you can sit him down. Ethan, man, thanks for coming around the stream. Yeah, thanks for stopping by here. Glad to see that you stopped in. Drake over Shep, even if Danny is at QB PPR too. I think, Ryan, I would go with Shepard over Drake if Daniel Jones does play. But Daniel Jones is doubtful right now, so you definitely got to go with the wide receiver option if Daniel Jones is in the lineup. But with him out of there, I don't really want to depend on Colt McCoy to put up numbers for your team. So, all right, you guys, the questions have slowed down here. I've been streaming for almost 2 hours now. Yeah, and I've got to get to some other stuff in my day. So thank you guys so much for stopping by today's stream. I really appreciate all of you guys that have come around for today's video. Last quick thing here, Jarvis or DJ Chark. I'll go with DJ Chark this week. But thank you guys again so much for stopping by the stream. Stay tuned for all my content next week. I'll be giving you guys tons of information, all of my rankings lists, my must-start and sit players. And I'll be coming out with positional rankings for all the fantasy relevant positions. So stay tuned for that, you guys. Let's have a strong finish to this season, and let's try and go out there and get a bunch of fantasy championships for you guys. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later. Peace out.